Fans of The Walking Dead have followed Negan's controversial evolution from bat-wielding villain to complex antihero. But even for diehard viewers, one part of his redemption arc never quite sat right: his sudden marriage to Annie in Season 11. Actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan himself once expressed frustration over the narrative decision, and as Dead City continues to explore Negan's psyche, it's increasingly clear that this storyline wasn't just awkward, it was narratively unnecessary. In fact, Dead City's handling of Annie and Joshua only underscores how out of place they were from the start. Negan's sudden marriage confused viewers and the actor. By the time Season 11 aired, Negan had already been on a long path of reckoning for his past sins. His love for his deceased wife Lucille had been a recurring theme, shaping both his cruelty and eventual remorse. So when he re-entered the show's final arc married to a woman named Annie, someone he met, married, and impregnated entirely off-screen, it felt jarring. The storyline lacked emotional build-up and even basic context. Jeffrey Dean Morgan didn't shy away from admitting this didn't sit well with him. On the Let's Talk Off-Camera podcast, he revealed, "Having him show up with a wife without telling the story of why and how is always a problem, an issue I had." His frustration mirrors that of fans who felt the sudden relationship served more as a convenient plot device than genuine character development. Annie was a shortcut to Negan's redemption. In the Walking Dead comics, Negan never remarries. After the Whisperer War, he isolates himself, haunted by guilt and determined to honor Lucille's memory by burying her remains and visiting her grave for the rest of his life. His grief becomes his redemption. The TV series, however, took a different approach. Instead of solitude and self-reflection, the show fast-tracked his rehabilitation by giving him a wife and unborn child. This move felt less like a natural character progression and more like a narrative shortcut to make Maggie's growing tolerance of Negan more believable. Rather than allow Negan to organically grow into a more humane figure, the show essentially handed him a ready-made family to mirror Maggie's situation, framing them as two sides of the same coin. But the emotional weight was never there. Annie was in only 9 episodes and barely developed as a character. Dead City pushes Annie and Joshua further to the margins. Dead City could have corrected some of these narrative gaps by showing Negan as a present husband and father. Instead, it doubles down on their absence. Annie and Joshua are off-screen from the beginning, sent away under vague circumstances, while Negan becomes caretaker to a girl named Ginny. This separation doesn't just diminish Annie's importance, it makes their relationship feel even more hollow. The show references Annie and Joshua just enough to remind viewers they exist, but not enough to make anyone truly care. It's difficult to invest in a relationship that's never been meaningfully explored or shown on screen. Meanwhile, the show gives emotional priority to Lucille. In hallucinations and flashbacks, Negan speaks to Lucille's memory with profound affection and regret. Their bond, tragic, flawed, and enduring, continues to shape his decisions. Even in death, Lucille remains the central emotional pillar of Negan's story, making the brief and shallow mentions of Annie feel even more misplaced. The show's cameos prove who really matters to Negan. In a pivotal Dead City episode, Negan hallucinates conversations with both Lucille and Annie. But the contrast in how these moments are handled speaks volumes. Lucille's presence is vivid, layered, and meaningful. She challenges and consoles Negan, reminding him of his failings and his humanity. By contrast, Annie's appearance is brief and largely symbolic, with little emotional resonance. If the writers had intended Annie to represent a new chapter in Negan's life, Dead City does little to support that claim. Instead, it leans heavily on Lucille's legacy, as if acknowledging that the original love story was the only one that ever truly mattered. A flawed redemption undone by convenience. Whether Annie and Joshua were introduced purely to keep Maggie from killing Negan or were meant to signal genuine growth, the result feels half-hearted. Negan's arc was powerful precisely because it centered on grief, regret, and the long, slow path to self-forgiveness. Rewriting that with an off-screen romance and child only diluted the weight of his journey. By sidelining Annie and Joshua in Dead City, The show inadvertently admits what fans and Jeffrey Dean Morgan suspected all along. They were never essential to who Negan is. Lucille remains the emotional compass of his story, and her memory, not Annie's, continues to guide his complex, morally gray evolution. In the end, the Walking Dead franchise may have tried to redeem Negan too quickly with the promise of a new family. But as Dead City shows, no matter how far he runs or how many new lives he tries to build, the shadow of Lucille is what truly defines him.